being called the broadest rewrite of Wall Street rules since the 1930s, legislation that's set to overhaul the country's financial system by demanding that Wall Street follow new and stricter rules. Now, a joint House and Senate committee approved this bank regulation bill that now goes back to each chamber for one final vote, and it's actually expected to be back on Barack Obama's desk by July 4th. So what's actually in this bill, and will it ensure that something like the 2007 financial crisis never happens again? Well, joining me to answer those questions, Gerald Celente. He is the director of the Trends Research Institute over in New York. So Gerald, Representative Barney Frank says, quote, "The cartoons are over. We're about to get into the double feature." Barack Obama saying that these reforms are making their way through Congress and they will prevent another financial crisis from happening. So what is in this bill that Barack Obama and these lawmakers are confident enough to say such things?
Well, I think you should listen to the language. The cartoons are over. Yeah, Mickey Mouse congressman should know a cartoon when he sees one. And it's a double feature. He's 100% right. Get ready for it. It's political theater. How could any adult believe what they're talking about? And I'm not saying this. Let me read from Bloomberg this morning. Banks dodged a bullet. A U.S. Congress dilutes trading rules. This isn't the World Socialist Organization writing this. This is Bloomberg. They didn't dodge the 1930s. Well, let's remember, they deregulated the regulations in the 1930s, like the Glass-Steagall Act, which would have prevented the too big to bail out banks from becoming too big, and they did nothing to stop the too bigs from even growing bigger.
Those politicians, well, we're glad that you're keeping a check on them. At least Gerald Celente is doing that. But Gerald, let's talk about the sort of winners and losers of this bill. Because many are saying, of course, it's a win for the White House, but also a big win for the U.S. Federal Reserve, an institution that's consistently coming under fire, at least from lawmakers like Senator Bernie Sanders and Congressman Ron Paul. What is your take on that this particular institution will probably get even more power with this bill?
Well, they are getting more power. As President Obama bragged about the great Consumer Protection Act put into place, look who's overseeing it. The Federal Reserve. Oh, great. That's like putting the Minerals Management Service that overlooks BP's disaster in all the oil industry in charge of overlooking the consumer. So it's nothing. As I said, Barney Frank said it. Get ready for the double feature. It's nothing more than political theater. It does nothing but keep the status quo in place. Look, you have 6 of the largest banks controlling nearly $10 trillion in assets. You have 3 of the banks controlling 2/3 of all the domestic credit card action. Nothing has changed of any consequence.
It's interesting that you say that because experts have said that, Barack Obama can sort of take this piece of legislation and wave it into the faces of those leaders that he's meeting with in Canada, the G8 and the G20, and say, hey, look what we did. But the bigger question here is that even with these leaders, they're having their own internal debate because Barack Obama is also, let's not forget, a proponent of the stimulus. So right now they're having a debate whether to cut spending, whether to implement austerity measures or continue with the stimulus. He seems to be in opposition with other leaders that are really calling for deficit reduction, while he's warning that if we cut the stimulus way too quickly, it's going to lead to another, depression.
Well, the United States has an advantage that they don't have, and that is Greece can't print more money. Spain can't print more money. The United States can. They have to go into austerity measures. It's insanity for President Barack Obama to keep telling nations and people to take on more debt as though that's going to somehow wipe away the old debt. So the Europeans know the story. They remember the tales of the Weimar Republic and runaway inflation. So austerity measures are on the table throughout Europe and much of the world. In the United States, they're going to try for more stimulus. It's not going to work. The game is running out. As we said, before the clock strikes 2011, the whole world will know that the crash of 2010 has occurred. These measures will do nothing to stop it.
But Gerald, at the same time, the people that we see on the streets, the people who live in some of those countries, they're protesting against these austerity measures. They want their government to spend more.
It's not that they want the government to necessarily spend more. They don't want to be taxed and penalized to pay off the bad bets of the banks. That's what that's all about. The banks rack up the big losers, and the little people have to pay them off. It's the same as with the too big to fails. The too big to fails are being saved by the too small to save. That's what that's about.
Or the small people, as that BP chairman likes to refer to those people as. But Gerald, let's talk about this in light of the jobs bill that was pretty much killed in the Senate. I want you to talk about these two bills. Why does one pass and one doesn't when the unemployment numbers are so high? I mean, people do need jobs. And like you said, the spending is getting out of control. But to the American people, they're looking to feeding their families, and they don't have a job. So wouldn't it make more sense to sort of pass that rather than this Wall Street reform, if you say it makes no sense either because it's a non-reform piece of legislation, as you put it?
Well, as we wrote, and this is going back to when the TARP bailouts began, history changed in the United States. And the headline now at Trends Journal was D.C. heist, Wall Street hijacks Washington. That's what you're saying. The country's being run by Wall Street. You look at the names, the people and the places, it's very clear. The little crumbs that they throw to the working people are just what you saw with Obama bragging today before he went to Toronto about the tough consumer protection legislation in this act that really does nothing. So it's just window dressing.
So Gerald Celente saying that this Wall Street reform is not really a reform at all and that it might not change anything. Gerald Celente, director of the Media Trends Institute over there in New York. Thanks so much for your analysis today.